if you just read the main content words, then it will hardly take us about 5 seconds. See, emerges, animals, first phase, India's ambitious project cheetah, establish sustainable population, 35 cheetahs from Africa. This is our second session on reading comprehension made easy. Now, in our previous session, we discussed how we can actually group words into meaningful pieces of information. Connected words, we pause after a group of connected words and then go to the next group of words. We absorb the idea or the information in these groups of words, which we were calling chunks. The group of words we were using the term chunk. We pause after every chunk, absorb them, try to connect them while we are moving on to the next chunk of information. Now, as a recapitulation, we would like to apply that concept or apply the technique here before we go to today's lesson. Let's apply the rule of breaking the passage into chunks, absorbing them and connecting these chunks as we are reading them. We need to pause after every chunk. Let us see how we should be pausing. It emerges that, pause, about 15% of the animals, pause, have not made it. What have they not made it? Past the first phase. They haven't made it past the first phase. Of what? Of India's ambitious project cheetah. Now the next piece of information, after you have finished understanding this part, the aim is, what is the aim? To establish what? Sustainable population of about 35 cheetahs in the next decade by bringing in a few where every year from Africa. Now, after the recapitulation, I would like to go ahead with the next concept of reading comprehension, particularly for those who are appearing for verbal ability tests. Today's session is about identifying the content words. Content words are words that have or that contain meaning. For example, look here. It, of, or is, to, or of, about, in, the. These words add to the structure of the sentence but do not have much meaning. They do have some meaning but not as much meaning as the main words like emerges, past, the first phase, 15%, India's ambitious project. So the words which I read out just now have more meaning than the other words. Words that contain more meaning or something that is the message that is conveyed in this passage, words that have the message in this passage are called content words. Now, one of the skills of reading comprehension is that is to be able to identify those words and just at a glance have a look at the passage and take those words out while reading immediately and get the main idea of the passage. Now, why should we actually look at those main words while even before reading the passage completely? Why should we actually look at those words? Because they will give us the background of the information given in this passage. Now, by doing that, sometimes it is possible that you answer some of the questions under the reading comprehension passage just by looking or having just by reading the content words. But remember, this could be very tricky because sometimes when you are reading the content words and trying to get the meaning without reading the structure words like the, is, to, and so on, it is possible that we omit words like not, never, neither, don't. Now, by doing that, if we omit these words, then it is possible that we get the message or the meaning completely wrong or the opposite meaning. So remember, you should develop a skill to identify the words which are important to get the right message. Do not omit words like not. You can omit words like is, of, and so on. But why should we in the first place omit small words and identify the content words, and then among the content words know those words which are more useful for our understanding than the remaining ones? Why is it important? Let's say this passage which we have here will take at least about 20 seconds for us to read properly. Properly in the sense to pause after a set of words and then go to the next one by connecting each other. So for that it might take about 20 seconds for us to read this passage. But if you just read the main content words, then it will hardly take us about 5 seconds. See, emerges, animals, first phase, India's ambitious Project Cheetah, establish sustainable population, 35 cheetahs from Africa. Now, if you look at these words, then it might hardly take you 5 to 7 seconds. So, you can actually reduce the time of understanding or trying to understand what is there in the passage in 1/3 or even 1/4 of the time taken to read the entire passage in detail. After having a look at the content words in this passage about Project Cheetah, we will look at another passage where the content words are many. That means there are some passages where the content words or words that have meaning are many in number, almost the entire passage. Every content word is important for us to get the meaning of that passage. Here is one passage which is again from the Hindu, written by Professor Sri Chandan from European Center for European Studies, and it is from the Hindu. This passage is an excerpt from his article where every word has content, and it is not easy for you to isolate some important words and get the gist of the passage there. Let's have a look. Now, let us apply that technique of identifying the content words and getting the main idea or the gist of the passage by applying that technique here to this passage. Well, this, as I said, is a passage from the Hindu, written by Professor Shakti Prasad, and he is an assistant professor at the European Studies Department of Jawaharlal Nehru University. Now, the content words: Russia, cohabitation, NATO, option, military action, changed everything, invading, Ukraine, Mr. Putin, NATO, expanding its base, contrary, triggered, NATO expansion. So if you have seen almost all the words, all the content words except except these words, almost all the words are needed for you to understand the meaning of this passage. Now, or to get the gist of the passage, you just can't say Russia and military action, Putin, NATO and expanding, contrary, NATO expansion. Now, if you randomly take some words and just read them, that doesn't help you in understanding the gist. You should be able to identify the main content words. And in some passages, it is not possible to get the gist of the passage by reading only a few words. It is necessary for you to go through all the important content words. And if you feel that you are not getting the message by just randomly picking some words, just follow our technique of pausing after a group of words or a chunk or a piece of information and go to the next chunk and connect it and get the message. Let's apply the rule of pause, absorb, and connect and get the message in this one. For Russia, pause, cohabitation with NATO was an option. Pause. But its military action, what did it do? Has changed everything. It has changed everything. By invading Ukraine, what has happened? Mr. Putin, what did he want to do? Wanted to stop NATO from expanding its base. What did he want to do? Stop NATO. NATO from doing what? From expanding its base. Pause here. On the contrary, but what happened? On the contrary, something else happened. It has triggered. What did it trigger? A NATO expansion. He wanted to stop NATO expansion, but it actually triggered and NATO expanded even more. This is the main idea of the entire essay. So I had taken this excerpt, and if you get a chance, please go through this article and it will certainly help you build your reading comprehension skills. Don't forget to apply our technique of pausing and absorbing and connecting the words.